What's wrong with just asking questions? Is that wrong to explore or question things different from challenging halacha? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying exploring questions.
Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with it. I think this issue affects every religion out there, not just Judaism. When you belong to a specific group within your religion, our religions have these subgroups within them, right? If you're a Christian, you could be a Baptist, Pentecostal, and there are subgroups within that. Same thing in Orthodoxy. Sometimes the group you join is not as open to questions and even new ideas as other groups within the same major group. Orthodoxy is very colorful. However, many rabbis, they would say otherwise. They would say, no, it's our way or the highway. I think these rabbis don't have a good grasp of Jewish history. This is why it's so important to explore Jewish history and explore what other cultures do within Judaism, within observant Judaism. I don't really like the word orthodoxy just because it was invented later on. It was actually invented by the Reform to ridicule the observant. I recently heard a class by Rabbi Chaim Ovadia. He said that the first Ashkenazim were the descendants of rabbis from Eretz Israel, and the Sephardi Jews were the descendants of rabbis from Bavel. And so that paints a different picture, because we know that a lot of the problems, a lot of the controversies, humrot that crept into our religion came to us through Talmud Bavli versus Talmud Yerushalmi, which takes a more rational, a more Mishnaic approach to Judaism, instead of what appeared in the Babylonian Talmud that brought in other ideas. Now, they're both commentaries to the Mishnah, but it seems that nowadays, especially with the advice of the Rambam says that the reason we go now mainly by Talmud Bavli versus Talmud Yerushalmi is because the Jewish people have adopted it. I don't think that was his quote alone. I think he was quoting the Rif on this. The Rif is really the one who made Talmud Bavli popular. Popular in the sense that the understanding is that nowadays we learn Talmud Bavli and we go by Talmud Bavli. Regardless, we go by the Mishnah. But in terms of how we understand ambiguous halachot in the Mishnah, we mainly go by the Bavli nowadays. But it really shouldn't be like that. And there's a handful of rabbis out there who are challenging the status quo regarding this. One, like I said, is Rabbi Chaim Ovadia. Another one is Rabbi David Bar Chaim. There aren't too many. Really, I would love to see a discussion between one of these two guys and the proponents of Haredi Orthodox Judaism today. It would be night and day between someone who's knowledgeable and someone who isn't. Like I said, this affects all religions. Sometimes you have teachers who actually think, who really try to give you something authentic, something that makes you think. And then you have other teachers that just regurgitate what their rabbis give them. And that's what you have to stay away from. But it takes, heck, you have to be able to walk before you can run. So when you're new to Judaism, what do you know? What did I know? Like, you hear someone teaching stuff you never heard before. And whether it's one of the rabbis that regurgitate or one of these more intellectual rabbis, regardless, it's going to sound astounding. It's the level of academia that's found in the Jewish world is not comparable. The goal is for you to get there quicker, and the goal is for you to learn things by hearing and not having to learn things the hard way. Right? There's many people that I've heard who've come on the show and have told me their story that they've been 20 years, 30 years in the Haredi system, in the yeshiva, and only now have they become more open-minded regarding to halakha, regarding different streams of halakha, the actual source material, sometimes overriding a Moraim, going straight to Tanaim. This is stuff that they don't teach you in the yeshiva world.
I'm saying more like I dig the question. I dig the answer that you gave. I thought it was a really good, coming from a Jerusalem Babylonian Talmud. I like that, but it seems like though people can't. Maybe I'm not wording it right. Just be open to speaking their mind. Just having their own thoughts and feelings in the matter. Is that like sort of a no-no from Judaism or in a Jewish perspective?
That's what I also see amongst the rabbis in the Jewish world, at least the popular ones, the ones that are on YouTube for sure. Not all rabbis are like this. There's many rabbis. I remember when I lived in Israel, people would go up and tell me, Kol hakavod, I watch your videos, this and that. It's a different world on Facebook. It's a different world in America. There's many rabbis who agree with what I do, but just don't speak out much. And the ones who do speak out sort of just repeat the same old lines over and over again. Heck, I appreciate that there are a bunch of different rabbis out there because people learn in different manners. I'm not a mystical guy. I'm not against people being mystical, as long as they're able to distinguish between halakha, hasidut, and all these concepts of gilgulim. That's fine, as long as you're able to make a distinction between all these concepts. I was chatting with Rabbi Dror today. Him and I talk back and forth via chat. I've been trying to interview the guy for a while. And I told him, look, even though we don't teach the same things, I support you. I've always liked Rav Dror in terms of his form of spirituality. There's some stuff that I completely disagree with. But in life, you're never going to agree with people 100%. This notion that you have to find a rabbi you agree with 100%, I mean, we're way past that, especially if you're a convert, if you're coming from some sophisticated religion like Christianity or Islam, you're on a much higher level than some Jose de Pechuva who knows nothing about religion, who's just being taught how to walk. You guys should be mature enough to know that you're never going to agree with a rabbi 100%. And if you do, then perhaps you've checked your brings at the door. And that's just the way it is. I don't expect you to agree with me 100%. And I don't get upset when you don't. However, a lot of these YouTube rabbis, it seems like they'll say it straight out. If you don't believe this, if you learn from that guy, you're a treif and I don't want you to watch my videos. This attitude. It's not a coincidence that people who say these things are Baltrivas themselves. All these YouTube rabbis, it's not a coincidence. They're what, maybe 8 years, 5 years religious? And heck, if you guys came from Christianity, I start counting from the day you became a Christian till now in how long you've been religious, because we still worship the same God. We just dropped JC and added a heck of a lot of commandments. You guys aren't new to religion. You guys have been thinking ethically for a while. Don't think just because your Hebrew is not so good and you don't know Jewish history so well that you're an amateur. This is why, I think the best Jew is a former Christian. We're so lucky that we have forms of media to communicate with, especially, I said last time I was in the air, that people, the mainstream Jewish world, know what Noahites have been going through for many years now, i.e. only having a religious identity online. People who are converting to Judaism, being that they live in the middle of nowhere typically and don't have a community of their own, have been utilizing online chats for a long time. And then I'm sure like you guys look at people going to church and communing with other people in their religion with a bit of jealousy, saying like, heck, the most I had was Google Hangouts and they canceled that.
It's becoming the norm now with the coronavirus. I guess you do virtual meetups. Dude, what's your take on that? Like a virtual minyan?
The notion of a minyan is optional. You don't need to daven with a minyan. You could daven alone. This is why I never understood the notion of a virtual Seder. However, there's no necessity for it. For some Beit Din in Eretz Yisrael to say it's okay to use Zoom for the Seder. And I don't know if you guys noticed, but the chief rabbi went against that Pasak and said, no, it's not okay. You guys could have a Seder alone. It's just traditionally Jews are used to having their grandparents there and, family members there, and everyone read a little bit from the Haggadah. So in that sense, yes, it's useful. For you guys who need a Seder, I'll tell you, like, if you guys have no issue with using electricity or the internet on Shabbat or on some sort of Shabbaton, Dennis Prager is actually doing a Seder. I'm a big fan of Dennis Prager. I actually used to work for Dennis Prager. I'm one of the founders of Prager University. When I was living in Israel, I was the head of the Israel Dennis Prager group. And I started Prager University with Al Nestrin because I'm a programmer. So then I developed the first website and I ran it for like 4 years before they really took off and they hired a whole company. But anyways, he's running a Seder. Dennis Prager is not an Orthodox Jew anymore. He grew up in yeshiva his whole life. And it's just interesting. If you guys need a Seder, a Gentile could lead your Seder, run your Seder. Like, as long as you're saying the brachas on your own, that's it. It doesn't, in case you guys have an issue with him, even though he keeps Shabbat, but he considers himself traditional. I'm not endorsing his level of religiosity. in case you wanted a more interesting Seder. I mean, he's very intelligent. If you guys have ever read his Rational Bible, I'm sure he'll make it interesting. I'm just saying that's an option. That's free. And of course, you'll have your own wine, grape juice, if you like. The rabbis hold that regarding Pesach, it's preferable wine, unlike for Kiddush and other instances that they say grape juice is allowed. Except in the most popular understanding that it should be wine for Pesach. The question is how much you have to drink. People talk about Purim. I don't know if you guys see my video against people getting drunk on Purim. Why hasn't anyone said anything about all the cups you have to drink on Pesach? So there's a machloket on that also between the Rambam and Tosfos. I think Tosfos says that all the cups of wine that you're drinking could actually be done from one cup. Just take a sip, take a sip, take a sip. But the Rambam says no, it has to be different cups.
Why wine?
The halacha is that it has to be something that ferments, that if something doesn't ferment, it doesn't qualify to be used for the Seder. I don't know what the connection of fermentation is. According to halacha, there is no grape juice. I mean, grape juice has the status of wine. Yayin also means juice. I mean, the notion of meats is a modern idea. There's fermented wine and unfermented wine. However, all grape juice in America is pasteurized, and that's never going to ferment, really. Drink grape juice if you guys don't like wine. I don't really like wine. But yeah, so the goal is to have your own bottle of wine or grape juice, have your little meal, have your matzah. Under the circumstances, in case you guys aren't able to get shmura matzah, there's an opinion in Shulchan Aruch that says, I brought it down in my video on making your own matzah, that in times of trouble, you're able to use regular kemach. This heter extends to buying non-shmura matzah too. Kemach is flour. If you were going to make your own matzah, you're supposed to use kemach that's shmura, that's used to make shmura matzah that's been guarded from water, from its harvesting. But in times of trouble, you're able to use regular flour. I mean, back then, the notion of even just buying matzahs was a new thing. Everyone always made their matzahs. This whole notion that people buy matzot made by other people is new, probably less than 200 years old. Not to mention that people made matzahs during Pesach. There's no issue with having flour in your house. What you're not supposed to have is chametz. So chametz is, as you know, flour that's had contact with water. Some say 18 minutes. Others, like Rabbi David Bar Chaim, teaches that it's actually around 45 minutes. It's 45 minutes or 18 minutes from when you stop kneading the dough. I also have a video that you can make pancakes and waffles for Passover. Not for the Seders, though. Why? Because there's a law. It's really a statement, I think brought down by Rabbi Akiva, that the matzah has to be what's called lechem ani. So lechem ani means poor man's bread. It's kind of stupid that people are paying, how much is it for shmur matzah? Like if you buy the fancy one in the box, was it like $8 a pound, $10 or $20 a pound? If it's supposed to be poor man's bread, why is it so expensive? So that in itself should really get people to buy machine shmura. So that's what I encourage. So the yekes are Jews from Germany, traditional Germany, way back then. They don't buy burnt matzah that we see in the Jesus movies. They have machine shmura. The understanding, at least amongst yekes, is that machine matzah is even more kosher than handmade matzah. Some people say no, but their understanding is that it is, and it's much cheaper than the one that's very expensive. That's like a whole big piece. Anyways, yeah. All right.